Hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what's in tomorrow's newspapers as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making their headlines with the Times columnist Matthew Syed and the writer and columnist Christina Patterson. So let's see what's on some of those front pages of those papers. Theresa May writes in the Sunday Telegraph that she has silenced her Brexit critics by securing the first stage of the deal. In the Sunday Times, the Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson calls on the Prime Minister to strike an exit deal that gives Britain the power to ditch EU laws. The Observer also leads with Brexit, saying Conservative peers are telling Theresa May not to bully members into backing an extreme form of Brexit. The Sunday Express also has the Prime Minister saying she'll press on with Brexit despite a Commons rebellion. The Mail on Sunday reports a left-wing group sent online abuse to a Conservative MP's pregnant wife. And the Daily Star on Sunday says two of Strictly Come Dancing stars are having a secret fling, which has been exposed online. Well, I'm joined now by Matthew and Christina. Really good to see you both. Season's greetings.
Thank you.
The first thing to say is.
Happy Christmas.
Let's start with this story, which is on the front page of the Telegraph. That is off Brexit. What's the paper saying?
Well, Theresa May
Long,
has...
deep breath before launching into the Brexit story.
How long have you got, Gamal? Theresa May has written a piece for the Telegraph, which we can't read, but it's quoted here. But she also appears to have written an exclusive piece for the Sun Express, and it sounds as though they're identical, so I'm a bit confused by that. But what she's basically saying is that she has proved the doubters wrong. And credit where it's due, she has got some kind of a provisional deal, which it looked as though she wasn't going to get. She pulled a rabbit out of a hat. She was applauded by members of the EU, led by Angela Merkel. So well done her. And it looks as though this means we will get some kind of transitional arrangement, which means that we won't be crashing out at least instantly, which is good for business, which I know Matthew is particularly keen on, and for stability and so on. What it doesn't do is solve any of the future problems. People are reading this as they want. So some people are saying, great, this means we're going to get a softer Brexit. Other people are saying it doesn't. Actually, it says nothing about the shape of future Brexit. And those discussions are going to start this week with a cabinet meeting on Tuesday. So, you know, it's a kind of good start. Obviously, people like me would rather it wasn't happening, but given that it is happening, I accept that it's a good start, and we'll see what happens from here.
She has bounced back. She had a lot of doubters, a lot of people saying that she wasn't going to be able to do it. She went to Europe and she was able to establish that deal. Matthew, what are your thoughts on the Chancellor's comments in China, basically saying that during that transition period, we will stay in the customs union, we will stay in the single market? MPs like Peter Bone, for example, an arch Brexiteer, is saying, well, hang on a minute, that's ridiculous to be saying that. Ian Duncan-Smith is saying that's not actually government policy.
Well, it goes to exactly the point that Christina was making, that even though Theresa May has demonstrated great resilience, psychological tenacity to get to this point, all of the big problems start now. Because it seems to me there are two views on Brexit that are effectively binary. And it's going to be extraordinarily difficult when the Cabinet discuss this for the first time, apparently, next week, to get the hard Brexiteers and those who are former Remainers who want a soft Brexit to find some middle ground. It's difficult to triangulate on that. And the point that you make, it's even going to be difficult to get them to agree on what the two-year transitional arrangements look like. Because as you rightly point out, Philip Hammond's saying we don't want a cliff edge, we need a two-year status quo scenario where we get to a point where we can come out of Brexit, and that sort of makes some sense. But Jacob Rees-Mogg will not accept that. He's called it a colony state. Boris Johnson, we're coming on to now on the front page of the Sunday Times in an exclusive interview with, I think, the political editor there has described it as a vassal state.
Yeah,
I mean, this
choice
is quite
words from the
it's
Foreign
emotive
Secretary.
words, but it indicates, I think, a deep emotional contrast between those who see Brexit in terms of nation state and democracy, and those who take a more pragmatic view that it should be more about trade. And this is going to play out over the next... You know, we think that there's been polarisation and animosity so far. I think it's going to get a lot worse.
Yeah, I mean, Peter Bone was saying that if you allow yourself to be subject to the trade rules and regulations of the European Union, then you are effectively in Europe.
Yeah.
So what's the point?
Well, there isn't a point. The whole thing is a complete waste of time and money. But the point is damage limitation. But we don't know if that's going to happen. But what the message that's coming well, that appears to be coming about the Tuesday cabinet meeting is that there appears to be a slight majority now in favour of what's called Canada, what they are calling Canada Plus Plus. Canada's trade deals took 7 years to negotiate. What they want on top of that, what we want apparently, is services to be included in that, which is 80% of our economy. Yeah. This is, lovely stuff, but there are no indications whatsoever that we'd get that. The EU have been very, very, very clear from the start that we are not going to get a bespoke deal. Now, it doesn't mean we won't, but we certainly can't bank on it. And what nobody seems to be talking about is if we do go for so-called Canada Plus Plus, i.e. not EFTA, which is the Norwegian situation where you pay to have access to the single market and the customs union, what's going to happen about Ireland? There can't be this non-hard border in Ireland if we go for Canada Plus Plus. So there are just all these irreconcilables, which all these people who keep banging on about sovereignty, who, by the way, didn't seem to be very keen on parliamentary sovereignty when there was a vote in favour of it this week, they don't seem to be able to reconcile these things.
Matthew, there is that issue about Ireland. There's a general feeling that that issue has been kicked down the road. It's going to pop up again at some stage, and it's going to be a massive headache for Theresa May.
It is going to be a hugely difficult thing because either we have the same regulations as the EU and prevent the hard border, or we don't. And it seems to me very difficult to find a middle route, although people are saying there can be customs arrangements which somehow find a way through that. It's very interesting when you look at this front page. You've got Boris Johnson gleaming out at you, that part of the calculation here is what is best for the country. There are alternative visions of where the country should be 5, 10, 15 years for the next generation. But there's also a very hard-nosed political calculation about their leadership ambitions. There are a number of people vying for Theresa May's job. She probably will, almost certainly won't stand as the Tory candidate at the next general election. Boris Johnson knows perfectly well that the Tory base are majority Brexiteers. And so part of this is positioning himself as a future leadership contender. But I think there are lots of others who are in that place too.
And that's half the cabinet.
Well, yeah, exactly.
This is the front page of The Observer. It's got this headline, "Call off Brexit Billies or face defeat. Tory peers tell May." A fair point.
Well, this is a very interesting piece, actually, and it's about Baroness Wheatcroft, Patience Wheatcroft, formerly editor of the FT, and Ros Altman, who is it? Ros Altman, who is the pensions advisor, former pensions minister, who are basically saying, steady on, let's calm things down, because what happened this week was really shocking. I was absolutely in favour of, Parliament was ultimately in favour of voting against the legislation this week. And from my point of view, that was not about thwarting Brexit. It was about parliamentary sovereignty, as indeed it was for the meaningful vote. And that's as it was for the 11 Tory rebels. And those rebels have had death threats against them. Anna Soubry has been, threatened with hanging and things like that. And
which is horrendous, and it's wrong. But does it weaken Theresa May's hand going to Europe? Because what will happen, or what people who are saying it will weaken her hand, is she will go to Europe, have a deal, establish it, shake hands, come home to England, and then if Parliament doesn't like it, they'll say, no, we don't like it.
It's called sovereignty, Gamal. That's the way it works and should work, and that's what this whole thing was meant to be about, parliamentary sovereignty, which Brexiteers seem to be a lot less keen on when it actually means that their, hard Brexit might be threatened. But the point about this is that these two peers are saying, look, we have a voice in all of this as well, and if you don't call off the attack dogs, basically, then we are going to make trouble for you. And I think they're quite right to do that, because the majority view in both the House of Commons and Lords is not for a hard Brexit.
I think there's a broader point here, which is that our political culture has become toxic. Instead of debating issues in a way that is rational and discursive, our political culture has become ad hominem. you just attack the man or the woman rather than the ball. I mean, I kind of get used to this, and as somebody who writes columns on football, that if you are critical of a particular club, they go after you personally, and the amount of invective is really quite graphic. Politics, since Brexit, I think, has gone down that route, and you see the way that MPs talk of each other, the way that people who rebel are being issued with death threats. I think this doesn't provide any optimism for a reconciliation when we do eventually get a Brexit deal. And I do worry about how this is going to linger as a poisonous influence in our political culture.
OK, well, hopefully it won't. Let's move on to the story, Mail, page 18. About the Queen's posh mints, apparently. What's this one about?
Well, this is a lovely, kind of what journalists like to call colour story from a former chef at, I think it's Sandringham, anyway, former chef of the royal family, and he's talking about the secrets of the Queen's Christmas traditions and what Meghan Markle, who is going to be spending Christmas with the Queen, and of course Harry, might expect. And among the little details to emerge are, I think this has been public knowledge for years, actually, that the Queen is very keen on Benedict's buttermints, those are her favourite chocolates. But there are all kinds of other lovely details, like that the corgis get individualised menus, and Prince William is very keen on chocolate biscuit cake, and Princess Diana used to love an apricot jam pancake. And I mean, as a big food lover myself, I just really love reading about this
it's
stuff.
Nice. I just remember reading Tony Blair's memoirs, and I think he spent a Christmas at Balmoral with the royal family. And apparently, he didn't have an ensuite. So they had to go to a bathroom. He said, had to open the door, look both ways down the corridor and dash in his underpants over to the water closet. Probably too much information.
That was not the occasion when Leo Blair was conceived, was it? That was when Cherie Blair didn't pack her, what she called her equipment, her contraceptive equipment.
Oh dear. OK, we're just going to pause momentarily for a break.
Exactly.
Do stay with us. Lots more to come, including apples knocked from top spot to Britain's favourite fruit. What's replaced it? Stay with us, find out in a few moments' time. Hello there, welcome back. Matthew and Christina are still with us. This is a story on the front page of the Mail. Got this headline, Corbyn's trolls to Tory MP. Hope your babies dies. I mean, you were talking a little bit earlier on about the vitriol, the hideousness of some of the comments that's come out recently in politics. I mean, there's absolutely no place for it.
No, it's really disgusting, actually, and it's bad enough, when we're going home and you look at your Twitter feed and it's full of horrible comments about you. Doesn't exactly gladden
Mine's
your
typically
heart.
always nice. No, it isn't. It isn't. You're right. Sorry.
Well, no, it mostly is. But I mean, it's generally mild, relatively mild stuff. But occasionally one gets something really unpleasant. Actually, I have had somebody tell me, not on Twitter, that they hoped my babies died. They said, "May your babies die in acid poison or something." I don't have any babies, but you can imagine that. It was a message I got once on a phone from a stalker of a kind. The level of abuse in public life now is just horrible, and it's personal and it's vicious. And I'm afraid that Jeremy Corbyn and Labour and John McDonnell and people at the top of the Tory party have not done nearly enough to make it clear that it is utterly unacceptable, and there is no place for it, not just in politics, but in public life. And one of the things I really lament about the internet and the rise of social media is how it has coarsened our public discourse. Exactly as you say, people attack individuals rather than their
keyboard warriors, isn't it?
I'm sorry, I was a bit glib earlier when I sort of interrupted you. I agree with you so much. I think women, in general, have it worse than men.
But
online.
you do get abuse.
I get abuse, and I have a small number of quite persistent trolls. But I think the sexualised language that women often have to endure is completely unacceptable. You talked about how it has coarsened our public discourse. I think that there's something interesting psychological here, in that some of the people who troll, they're at home, they don't physically see the person who is recoiling from the abuse that they're issuing. And it's a bit like when you're in a car and you make gestures that you would never do if you're in physical proximity to somebody. And I think it is a big danger for us, and I think we always have to try and mitigate that tendency. And I suppose for anyone who is in public life, they have to have very thick skin.
OK, let's move on to this story, which is in the Express about young people and the pension pledge. Which one's this?
This is your one, Christina.
The Express, yeah. Pension pledge for young people.
Well, it's to do with, sorry, I wasn't expecting this one,
Yeah,
but it's to do with mandatory enrolment in pensions. I think it's already happening at a certain level, but they're now the plan is to introduce it even to 18-year-olds going into work, so that people pay something. They start the saving, and it's much needed because people are not saving nearly enough for retirement, and the expectation of index-linked pensions and employee pensions are shrinking enormously. All those gold-plated pensions are sort of, if not, have either gone or are on their way out. And the general, the figures show that people are not saving nearly enough for retirement. So I think it's a good thing if people are being enrolled into
good thing, because people aren't saving near enough because they can't. You know, they've got high rents or they've got mortgages to pay. Those who can afford to buy a house, which it seems to be few and far between these days.
And with an ageing demographic, there will be a massive potential deficit in our pensions in years to come. I'm also quite interested in the political dynamics of how young people are moving up the agenda when it comes to the political promises that are made. In the past, older people as a demographic came out in numbers to vote at general elections, and so they exercised extraordinary power as a lobby, and I think a lot of the policies have been, understandably in a democracy, configured for them.
Yeah.
I think it's great that young people are now starting to vote in large numbers, and I think that discrimination will hopefully end.
About a minute ago, let's talk about this story which is in the Mail. Britain's most popular fruit. Apparently, it's not apples anymore.
This is a big one, isn't it, Christina? This tickled us because
more important than Brexit.
because in actual fact, the most popular fruit depends on whether it's the amount we spend on that fruit, in which case it's grapes, a rise of 3.6% over the last 12 months, to just shade it over apples, which only went up by 2.1. But if you're doing it by weight, bananas come through, 19 million to 551 million, up 3.6%. I like bananas. I mash a banana into my porridge in the morning. I know that people have been
I like
a few almonds on top.
Very nice, very healthy. God, I like my grapes in my wine, basically. I don't think any need to buy them as a fruit.
Red grapes or green grapes?
Sorry?
Red grapes or
in her wine?
No, in my wine. I don't actually eat the grape, obviously. That would be a very waste of labour. I mean, I think in a nice Chablis or a Shiraz, that's
very
definitely the way to consume them, yeah.
Matthew, Christina, good to see you. I'll see you in about half an hour or so, I guess. Do stay with us. For now, let's have a look at the weather.